We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at He Who Fights with Monsters, Issue 1. This is a 2021 series from Ablaze Comics. Story by Francesco Artabani. Art by Werther Del Edera. Colors by Giovanna Nero. Letters by A Larger World Studios Troy Pateri. I have the cover by Werther Del Edera. Managing editor Rich Young. Edited by Kevin Kettner. The cover's okay, but it really doesn't tell you what the story's about. And you don't really find a whole lot out about the core issue in the story until much later in the book. So we start off with the Russians being in control of Prague in the summer of 1945, and a puppeteer talks to a Russian soldier and wants to tell him a little story. And now this takes place 3 years earlier, because the story is largely flashbacks, what's being told through the puppets to this Russian soldier. So in 1942, the Germans are going door to door and gunning down people that are of a certain religion. But while one guy is caught out and about, he shows some papers saying that he's a doctor and he had been called away for emergency, and the Germans have to let him go because they don't want to risk offending higher-ups. Well, it turns out these are forged papers, and he is actually a Jewish man smuggling some food and a few other things to some secret tunnels underneath the city, where there are a few of his friends and neighbors and others living, including a man that's clearly sick. And the sick guy is telling him the story of a great Marl of Prague, Rabbi Judah Loben Bazel, who brought to life a mighty creature known as the Golem. Now, the story of the Golem is very, very old, but in this particular tale, the clay that created the Golem still exists. So when the Golem was dismantled, the clay that formed the Golem was put under a building. So that is still there, just waiting to be reactivated. So that seems to be the lead-in to the next issue. Now, this issue was good setup, but there wasn't enough here to really get to the point. By the time you learn what the story is about, you're at the end of the issue. And it's clearly written as a graphic novel and not single issues, because it just abruptly ends. You have no idea why it ended the way it did. It just very suddenly ends. But I was okay with it because the story was pretty interesting. The art's pretty good for the style it's in. It's not my favorite, but it's not bad. And the general concept is interesting. So I'm gonna check out issue 2 and see where it goes. If it's at least as interesting as this setup is, then I'll definitely be reading issue 3, but the way they abruptly ended this issue was a little bit jarring, and I found that very frustrating because it didn't really get to the point until later on. And the build-up is kind of necessary to establish what's going on in the story. It was just such an abrupt, strange spot to end it on that it was very obviously taken from a larger work that was meant to be as a collected work. But I will recommend the story so far, so if you're looking for this, I would say pick it up at a reasonable price, but I would probably just wait till the trade paperback came out unless you really want to read this, because it's obviously designed to be read as a single story and not in little segments. So we'll see how the next issue goes, but until then, I'll recommend it, but only if you really want to read it. As far as World War II tales go, it's got a lot of potential, but again, I get the impression this is supposed to be read as a graphic novel, so I'd wait for the trade. That's just my take. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Teespring store, the Patreon, and the Streamlabs are all in the description. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one.
We are about to embark upon a series of strange and exciting, dangerous adventures. Adventures that will lead us to all parts of the world.
Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at He Who Fights with Monsters Issue 2. This is a 2021 series from Ablaze, story by Francesco Artabani, art by Werther Del Edera, colors by Giovanna Nero, letters by A Larger World's Troy Pateri, cover art by Werther Del Edera, edited by Kevin Kettner, managing editor Rich Young. That cover is boring. It does nothing to sell this book. It's very simplistic. It does match the interior art, but it's boring. boring. It doesn't tell me when this takes place, what's going on. There's no implied action. I don't know what I'm supposed to think of this. When you get into the book, however, the woman on the cover we find out is Zuzka, and she is the girlfriend of Radek, who we met last issue, and who is the doctor that's been helping the Jews. He's also Jewish. Her brother and a couple of his idiot friends need to stay in her house for a few days because the Gestapo are cranking up the heat and looking for members of the Prague Resistance, and they're going to bring a bunch of people in to crush that, and that doesn't make things any better. We find out also that there is a spy helping the Nazis, and that is oddly the puppeteer, but he's doing it to feed his family, which he's got a daughter, so he's selling people out to save himself and his family. And obviously these are strange times they're living in, and we learn a little bit about how they're ramping up taking Jews out of the city by train to the camps, and that kind of pushes Radek to his breaking point, and he goes into the old synagogue, breaks in through the boarded up doors, and goes up to the attic, tears up the floorboards, and finds what the professor told him was there. So the professor gets eager and goes up to the attic with him, and they are able to reform the Golem. So they recite the incantation, and we get a cliffhanger ending. So overall, this is a pretty good story. It's obviously a continuation of the Golem story from the old legends, and it's pretty good. The book is clearly a graphic novel broken up because the points it ends at are kind of weird. This one was a little bit better, but still obviously not meant to be a point at which the story abruptly ends. It should have natural breaks, and this looks a lot like a graphic novel that was broken up into sections. But it's been really good. This issue was a little bit better than the first issue, and a lot more happened. It got rolling a lot faster, and I think this would actually make a pretty decent movie. But right now, the comic miniseries is really solid. So if you like the art from Something is Killing the Children, then you'll probably like this art. It's definitely not for everyone, but it's not bad. I've seen a lot worse, and the story is really interesting. It's getting good. I think it really picked up a lot of steam where last issue looked like it might be kind of boring. This one actually started going somewhere. So if you're looking for a World War II supernatural tale, then this might be for you. So I'll recommend it. I didn't feel cheated for the money. I like this issue way better than issue 1, but the covers are garbage and do not help sell this book at all. If you get a chance, check it out. It is a fun story, but it is really, really undersold by the cover and the descriptions online. So that'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links to my Teespring store, Patreon, and of course Streamlabs, which accepts PayPal, are all linked below. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at He Who Fights with Monsters, Issue 3. This is a 2021 series from Ablaze. Story by Francesco Artabani, art by Werther del Adera, colors by Giovanni Nero, letters by Troy Pateri of A Larger World Studios, edited by Kevin Kettner, managing editor Rich Young. I have cover A by Werther del Adera and Giovanna Nero. So with the Golem awake, Radek and his friend have to make an escape from a patrol of Nazis, and things don't go very well for the Nazis, especially because their superiors don't believe them about a giant. They take the giant down to the basement while the Nazis try and figure out what's going on, and Radek has to convince his girlfriend to get in touch with her contacts in the underground, mostly her brother, but they don't like him, and they don't trust him, and she thinks he's lying anyway. And we see a little bit about the guy that runs the puppet shows and what his involvement in this is, and then we're left with a cliffhanger ending that looks like it's going to go pretty big with a bang. There is a preview for some book called Laura that I do not care about at all. Overall, I'd say the art style is growing on me in this book. They do really good work with shadows, and the buildings look cool. So overall, I thought the story is picking up. It's a little slow going in the beginning, but I would definitely say if you want to read this book, buy it in trade paperback, because it is such a slow burn that the first 2 issues are going to seem almost like the book is going nowhere. But it's just build up for the story. This is much more cinematic storytelling than it is an action book. So if you're looking for an action book, you're in the completely wrong place. There is some action, but it's not the focus of it. It's mostly the story about what these 2 guys are doing. And I think it's a good book. It's got good storytelling technique. The story is interesting, but it really deserves to be read as one complete story and not in small sections. I think that's a disservice to the storyline and will actually turn people off. Plus the cover's kind of boring. Doesn't tell you anything about what's going on in the book. It looks like it's a panel that they randomly chose put on the cover for some reason. That doesn't do it any favors either. The paper quality is real nice though. You get a decent product for $4. It's just a matter of, are people going to take the chance on a book like this? And I would have to say if they read book 1 or 2, they're probably not going to stick with it long enough to see the payoff, which is a shame because it is a pretty interesting story, but it would be better to sit down and read it all at once. So I will recommend it, but I would recommend getting it in trade paperback because if you try and read the individual issues and you space them out, you're going to be bored real fast. But I would say if you're interested in World War II stories or in stories of supernatural beings, this might be for you, but you'll want to read it in trade so you get the whole collected story as opposed to little dribs and drabs of the story that probably aren't going to keep your interest that well. That'll do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description for ways to support me, including the merchandise store. And as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we're looking at He Who Fights with Monsters, Issue 4. This is a 5-part mini-series from Ablaze, written by Francesco Artabani, art by Werther Del Adera, colors by Giovanna Nero, letters by Larger World Studios Troy Pateri. I have cover A by Werther Del Adera and Giovanna Nero, edited by Kevin Kentner, managing editor Rich Young. Cover's actually the best one so far, and that's not saying a lot because it's still kind of boring. Plus it's issue 4, it's kind of hard to jump in so close to the end of the series, but the cover is pretty good. It's definitely the best one so far. So after the cliffhanger ending of last issue, we find out what happened when the Resistance went after the German entourage, and we see for the first time the Golem go into action. Now the Germans don't really believe the only survivor, or they do, and that's even more frightening, but the Golem and his allies were able to save the puppeteer's daughter, and she insists on going home to her father, but they disappear quickly thereafter. And this action they did only brings the Germans down even more heavily on the locals, and they start really looking very hard for this so-called giant that they've heard about. Meanwhile, Radek is gathering up some more mud in what might be an attempt to make more golems, and the Germans have put the word out that there is a massive reward for anyone with information as to where the Resistance might be, and they have upped this goal in Yassel's presence, that's the Golem, is worth a million crowns, and one cast member appears to be getting very, very greedy. We're left with a cliffhanger ending that does not look good for the Resistance. There's also a preview for Laura #1, which looks really boring, and the art looks very well done for the style it's in, but it doesn't look like it's anything I'm going to be interested in. This story had pretty decent art for the style that it's in as well, but it's only okay. It's not my favorite. I don't hate it, I just don't really love it. But the artist has a really good sense of proportion and angles, so it's really well done in that regard. The story's been really good. It's not going to be for everyone. It's not an action story. It's just sort of a fable, and I've been liking it quite a bit, so I'm looking forward to seeing how the story wraps up. So I will recommend this, but only if you're going to read the entire thing. So I'd probably recommend just getting it in trade. It's going to be out, I think the hardcover comes out in April of 2022, and that might be the best way to read it because it really doesn't look like it was meant to be broken down into chapters, and it would probably flow a lot better as a single story as opposed to little sections. So I would say try and get it in a collected format rather than picking up and hunting down the single issues. You'll get a much better story experience that way than you would reading the individual issues. That's gonna do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description for our various support methods, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one. Hello and welcome to another Bad Comic Review. This time we are looking at He Who Fights with Monsters, Issue 5. This is the final installment in the mini-series from Ablaze Comics. Story by Francesco Artabani, art by Werther Del Adera, colors by Giovanni Nero, letters by Larger World Studios Troy Pateri. I have cover A by Werther Del Adera and Giovanni Nero, edited by Kevin Kentner, managing editor Rich Young. So the Germans are on their move, and they've quickly established establish where the resistance was hiding, and by resistance I mean a bunch of old people, women, and kids. Unfortunately, Radek sees the results with Yassel, and that's not helping the situation. The puppeteer has a talk with the Germans trying to get his daughter back because she was down in the Resistance HQ, and he makes a deal with them. But word gets out that the train full of people are being moved on a specific night, so Radek and his friends go to stop it. The Golem stops the train, but unfortunately it's a trap, and things are a lot darker than they appear. There is a really, really dark message in this issue, and although the puppeteer is telling us this years later, it really shows that sometimes the things you think are helping really aren't, or that they're just too big. It leaves you with a really downer ending that is a lot more impactful than I expected it to be. This was a really, really good story, but not in the way you would think. It is not a traditional action-adventure story, and there are no happy endings in this. So I will recommend this. I did like the story. The art really is an acquired taste. If you like it in Something is Killing the Children, I think it's a lot more refined in this book. Sometimes the proportions are a little weird, but not nearly as bad as they were in Something is Killing the Children. Not a giant fan of this art style, but it does work pretty well. The colorist did a really good job, and it really brought out the fire elements quite well, and the artist does understand perspective shots and shadowing and detailing, so I didn't have that big of a problem with it. It's just not to my particular taste. But I will recommend this. I would definitely say get it in trade paperback, though, if you're going to read it. The individual issues have bizarre ending points at times, and it could throw you off a little bit, and you'll get a better story experience by reading it as a collected work. The cover, again, does not sell the book. This is actually the best cover so far, and it really does not sell this at all. So don't be dissuaded by the cover, give it a chance, and I think you'll find a really interesting story here. That's going to do it for this one. Thank you so much for listening and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future reviews. If you'd like to help the channel out in other ways, links are in the description to various support methods, including the merchandise store, and as always, we hope to see you on the next one.